The Torah begins, Vayera Elov Hashem be'elonei Mamre, that as Rashi explains, that God appeared to Abraham in the plains of Mamre, and Abraham was sitting Pesach O'ol Kachom Hayom. So why did God come? It's a very strange question. God just appears. It doesn't say what the purpose of the visit was or what's going on. So Rashi fills us in. L'vakar es hachola. He came to visit the sick. Who was sick? Abraham, because there's assumption that it's a continuation here from the end of Lech Lecha. Avram had a major surgery, a circumcision, and he was recovering. And therefore, usually Avram's busy. He's going out. He's spreading ethical monotheism, doing chesed. He's busy. But God, and he knew Avram that he wouldn't sit down for a minute. If someone else needed something, he wouldn't take care of himself. So God made it very hot outside to try to keep the people inside their own tents so they wouldn't bother him and let him get better. So Avram came down, so God came down, L'vakar es hachola. And that's the Gemara in Sota. The Gemara learns out that we have a mitzvah to imitate God. Like how can we imitate God? God he's not a physical feature, so we have to imitate his midos. So just like he visits the sick, so too we have to. It's like he does bikar cholam, just like God does, so this kavayachol comforts the mourner, just like he does, so we learn out the different midos. So Avram was recovering from circumcision, and therefore he had a din of a cholah, and not that you could visit someone. The different laws of bikar cholam. You could visit someone even if they're not sick, but Bikar Cholam has specific rules and regulation. What is the definition of a cholah? What do you have to do? I guess one of the halachas of Bikar Cholam is you have to pray to God. So I guess that's one thing God doesn't have to do in his mitzvah. There's different aspects, obviously, of Bikar Cholam. You make sure you take care of the needs of the patients. And the Ramah brings down, based on the Ramban and Torah's Adam, you have to always pray. You say, it's like we have a statement we say when we comfort a mourner, Hamakam Yinachem Eschem. So too, Hamakam Yerachem Eschem. God should give you a refuah shnema b'toch shtar chol Yisrael. So part of the mitzvah bikar cholim is to pray, make the person feel. And the Gemara talks about different stages when you shouldn't go. Like the first 3 hours of the day you shouldn't go. Because why? Why shouldn't you visit the first 3 hours? Because because in theory, the first 3 hours the person's feeling good. They just woke up, they're well rested, so they're looking better than they really are. Oh, who needs to come visit him? He looks better than me. And the last 3 hours, you say, what's the point? He's like on his deathbed, like what's the point? So he's not as bad. So they say come in the middle hours. In fact, there's a famous story with the Brisker Rav, that I guess he was sick one time, and this nudnik came to visit him. And basically what I mean, a nudnik was he came and he wouldn't leave. And also part of the mitzvah b'ik cholam is you have to make sure the person wants you and don't stay too long, etc. You gotta take care of the cholah's needs. So I guess he was staying, and the Brisker Rav was giving him all these hints, and he just wasn't getting it. So I think the Brisker Rav said, he quoted this chazal that, let's go see. You can't come assuming a 12-hour day. So the first 3 hours you can't come, the last you're only down to 6 hours. And the Gemara's Chazal tell us you could do Bikar Cholam afilu me'ah pa'amim. You could visit the sick even 100 times in one day. So he says, do the math. If you could come 100 times, you only have 6 hours. How long should each visit be? I think after that, the person got the hint. So either way, so Avram was involved, so God was involved in the mitzvah of Bikar Cholam. And that's how we learn to do Bikar Cholam from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then all of a sudden, then it says, and he was in the plains of Mamre. What's Mamre? What are the plains of Mamre? So Mamre is the name of a person. So why was the place? Usually you have to be famous or infamous. You name a place after someone. In fact, I think I just read somewhere they had PETA, the ones who are interested the ethical treatment of animals. So in theory, not in theory, in practice, we have many halachas, sar b'alei chayim, we have biblical laws. You have to treat animals properly. But in all midos is, when you take care of all human creatures, or even not not even human creatures, all animals, but it's always what's the emphasis on. If you put too much emphasis on one thing, if it's out of whack, then even a good meat is a problem. If you go overboard and you're more concerned about animal rights than you are humans, then you have a problem. When they're going to serve squirrel, I don't know what the turn on a squirrel would be anyway, but if they're going to serve squirrel in your restaurant and you say, I'm going to firebomb it and kill people, so clearly you're totally out of whack and you're going to dump ink on people with fur coats. So obviously the ikar is human beings, but in fact some Rishonim learn really there's nothing as animal rights. What do you mean animals don't have rights? You have to treat them, human beings have rights. And some even say it's not even concern for the animal, it's concern for humans, that you should treat animals properly, so you should get accustomed to treating everything you do, just like we do many things, even inanimate objects. Every Friday night we cover the challah when we make kiddush, because really if we had wine and bread during the year, during the week, we'd first make the bracha motzi, then boer pri hagafen. So the bread used to be king, so not to embarrass the king, so we cover up the challah. Back in the day they didn't take the challah out. Does the challah really have any feelings? Of course not. The point is, but if you practice on inanimate objects, then hopefully you'll internalize. I see many times in many homes they have the challah covered, but I see the spouses seem to be screaming at each other and embarrassing each other, so they're clearly not getting the message of the challah cover. The point is to internalize. So we go to inanimate objects, animals, but the purpose is that we treat people properly. So I think so. The Pita wanted, there was a big accident where there was a truck turned over and killed, I think, hundreds of fish. They wanted them to put up a sign in this town saying, in memory of it. The town said, no, we only do it for people. But either way, so anything out of whack is, any good meat that can be perverted, as we know. So, who is Mamre? So Rashi writes, Thu Jun eitza al hamila. He gave Avraham advice on the Milah. Since he gave advice to Avraham on the Milah, it was named in his presence. So, I mean, obviously it's questionable from all angles. Let me get this right now. God commands Avraham to do a Milah. Okay, I don't know. God said, I'm not sure, should I do it? Let me speak to Mamre. Let's see what he has to say on the matter. Oh, and Mamre says it, so people, a lot of people say, Derek Drush, that see some, among especially, non-observant Jews, you find this, even among some observant Jews, but among non-observant and secular people, you find the special chashivas for doctors, PhDs, and other secular accomplishments, and that Gentiles have, and that really makshir of Torah. In fact, Torah is not for them, and so for some people, it's a joke, but unfortunately it's true in many cases, is they said, if God says, or if the rabbi tells you to do something, who cares? But if a Gentile tells you, it must be important, and if Mamre says to do the Milah, so it wasn't if Avram would have done the Milah anyway, but he wanted for future generations to ensure that they do Milah, so he gave Mamre credit. And interesting enough, we see the Gemara tells us in Shabbos, Milah is one of the few mitzvahs that are still done today. I think Milah and Yom Kippur, that we know among non-observant Jews who don't keep, the majority of the mitzvahs, as ironic as it sounds, Milah is one of them, and like Milah involves like paying, like Milah you would think like that's one, okay, if I'm picking and choosing, Milah would not be the one and Yom Kippur, fasting, so it's interesting to note that of the two mitzvahs picked, ironically, it's not things, it's not Simchas Torah, it's not Purim, and that's what the Gemara tells us, because they will makabel up as Simcha. So when the Jews accepted Milah, and when they accepted Yom Kippur, since the Jews, it's always important to get a good start, and you play the momentum. And since they accepted the mitzvahs b'simcha, so therefore even today we do it b'simcha. An example of a mitzvah that wasn't accepted b'simcha is tefillin, and that's why many people don't put on tefillin. In fact, I remember when we had the yeshiva here many years ago, and a couple of summers we rented it out to the Chabad. Chabad came from Toronto, and they used it, the yeshiva, for the summer. There are many interesting stories there, but one of them, as we know, so Chabad is very meticulous. Tefillin is a big one. They have the Tefillin mobile, and they go around. I saw them throughout the summer. We're downtown with that Tefillin going around getting in Matan. It's a great thing. You get another Jew to put on Tefillin. Kol HaKavod. So they didn't know anyone in the community. They didn't know me. So I think it was Sunday or Friday, I don't know when it was, I was outside barbecuing. I don't know, I was wearing sweats and a sweatshirt, they obviously didn't know. I guess they saw a mezuzah on the door, so they knew I was Jewish, and they knocked and they said, oh, how you doing? They said, do you want to put on tefillin? So I said, Rashi or Rabbeinu Tam? And I was just kidding, and then I said, do you know why, so I said to them, do you know why you're doing this? They look, getting these blank looks, cognitive dissonance. I'm asking them, first, they're saying, they don't know how to answer. As you know, the Gemara in Shabbos, since the Jews do not accept tefillin, but simcha, so therefore future generations are not going to do it begrudgingly. So therefore, you've taken upon to go around and do the tefillin. So either way, so that's how some say more. I wouldn't say that's the real pshat here, but some say derech. Unfortunately, there's some truth to every joke. But now that Mamre said it, a Gentile said it. So okay, Mila is going to be one that the Jews are going to accept. And that's what it points out that and some say he wasn't really giving advice. He wasn't really asking. Again, we could give a whole shiur, maybe we will, on this Rashi alone, the different pshatim, hu shanatzel eight salamila, but that's just one for now. And it says he was sitting, usually it's spelled sitting, yud vav, yoshev, yud vav shin beis. Here it's spelled without a vav. So it's spelled chaser. And we have a general rule, the different, the others write, that when the Torah writes something in a complete form, so it means it in its full meaning. When it's written chaser, lacking, so it doesn't mean it fully. So yashav ksiv, so let's say we all know, we've all been in school, and let's say the bell, class is over in a minute, so we're waiting for the bell, we're sitting like we're about to jump out of the seat. So Avram was, but that's, we could discuss it, it's a good thing or a bad thing, but as Mark Twain likes to say, don't let school get in the way of education. It's my shita. So therefore, basically, but assuming school is a good thing, so therefore there you're running, the expression the Gemara uses negatively, a tinek shaboreach mibeis, I guess they're assuming in that school you're learning something, but a tinek shaboreach mibeis sefer, so the Jews in Har Sinai couldn't, they ran off Har Sinai very quickly, whatever, so there was criticism of them. So either way, so they point out that Avram was, in a positive sense, he couldn't sit because he was itching. He was looking around. Where is everybody? He wanted to do the mitzvah of Hachnasas Archem, and therefore that's why Yashav, he wasn't really sitting. He was on the tip of his chair, ready to pop up, and that's what Rashi writes. And therefore, because of this, Bikesh Ramo. Therefore, Amalei Hakadosh Baruch Hu, you sit, and I'll stand. And later on, it'll be assigned to your kids that, when in the basin, I'll be that God will be standing and the basin will be sitting. So where do we see Avram judging anyone? What's the reward? The fact that Avram couldn't sit still, he was about to jump up and do a mitzvah of Hachnasas Archem. Where do we see Avram judging anybody? Like, what is it? Why is Rashi telling me this din with about a basin? So I once heard a pshat from one of my Rabbeim, Rav Nissen Alpert, Talmud of Rav Moshe Feinstein. So he says as follows, because we know we have a saying in the Gemara that Hillel was mechayev da'aniyim. That Hillel obligated, what does that mean? Hillel was mechayev da'aniyim. In other words, there's a famous story with Hillel. Back in the day, they used to charge to get into the Beis HaMedrash, to get in to learn. So, today it probably wouldn't go over that well. But so therefore he couldn't afford, he didn't have any money. So he was machshiv Torah so much, he went on the roof and he was trying to put his ear to listen to get some Torah in. I guess there was a big snowstorm came and they basically were stuck and someone looked up and they saw a body and they came down and got him. So the Gemara has an expression, what does that mean, Hillel's mechayev? And the person would say, you know what? I'm so poor, I don't know if I'm afflicted with poverty, or, and today that means you don't have cable, you don't have two cars, whatever it means in the generation. But I have no time, I'm too busy, I'm not downplaying, of course parnasa is important, you have to make a parnasa, but I have no time for learning, I have to go ahead, I have to die. Look, no one was poorer than Hillel, and Hillel found time to learning, and the same thing, not just with learning, and Chazal give, different people, you say you couldn't do this because of that, well, this person chose it's not true. Like, whether it was Noach, Avram, etc. So that's what it means. That it wasn't that Avram was judging anybody, But the fact that it was showing, that's how much potential we have. That even when you're sick and even when you're not feeling well, doesn't mean, you shouldn't be doing the mitzvah, bikor cholim, or other mitzvahs. And therefore, that's what it says here. He was sitting and he was waiting back and forth. He was waiting for people to come out. And God made it very hot outside. So that's the first Rashi. And then we'll do one more. This is a famous Rashi. V'nei shlosha anashim. And he saw 3 people coming. Vayera to cross them, and he ran to them. This is a famous Rashi. Shlosha anashim. What do you mean 3 people? Echad, and there were actually angels dressed up as people. Echad levaser es Sarah, went to visit Sarah. Ve'echad lahafach es Sodom, went to destroy Sodom. Ve'echad l'rapos es Avram, and one came to heal Avram. So it seems to be a waste of angels. Just send one angel down and let them take care of all 3 jobs. Telling Sarah the news that she's going to have a baby, the news to Avram that she's going to destroy Sodom, and the news that he's going to come and heal Avram. So she'ein malach. So Rashi quotes the Gemara about Mitzia. She'ein malach echad oseh shtei shlichos. That one angel doesn't do more than one job, and that's why you have to send each one. And then at the end, and then at the end of the Rashi, it says in the one, the Rafal when Sharipas Avraham halach misham lahatzel etzlot. So Rashi seems to contradict himself here. First he just says, why do we need 3 different angels? Have one angel take care of the job of taking care of Avraham, telling Sarah she's going to have a baby, and healing Avraham, because that's just the rules. The rules are 1 angel per job. So then he says, but the angel that healed Avraham went to heal Lot. So what's going on here? So someone will explain as follows: that why didn't Lot get his own angel? Why not have 4? So some explain because apparently, obviously, not everyone's deserving of an angel. We have a concept of a bris milah, a mitzvah, that Eliyahu comes down, and that's a famous. As I'll get to, it will be a famous story of Shlomo Kluger that's based on this Rashi here. That he says that what happened. What happened in. So obviously Lot didn't deserve his angel. Once the angel came down to heal him, he went to heal Lot. So if Shlomo Kluger was asked, there was a case, someone just had a baby, and the grandfather was dying, and it's like the ghost days. They thought any moment. And back in the day, before nursing homes and people used to live at home and take care of their own, you used to have different generations living in the home, and you had the grandchildren taking care of the grandparents, etc. And you had many people in a home. As they say, today the homes have got much bigger, but there seems to be a lot less room in them because people don't seem to have room for anybody. But back in the day when they were big in Hachnatzas Archim and other things, so they used to pack them in. So they asked, they wanted to name him after the grandfather. So we know by Milah and by other mitzvahs, reason magdim la mitzvahs. You're supposed to do the mitzvah as early as possible. They want to know, could we wait? They're not going to push off the Milah. We're going to do it day 8. But instead of doing it at 7 a.m., could we wait till 2 o'clock? Maybe Grandpa will go by then. Because we want to name him. We want to name the. So they went to Rav Shlomo Kluger. He said, "Chas v'sholom." He said, "No, wait. Do the bris right away. Your grandfather will be fine." So sure enough, they did the bris right away. They named them. Apparently, this was an Ashkenaz couple. Why do I say that? Because Sfar didn't name after live people, so it wouldn't have been an issue. So they went to. So sure enough, they did the bris, and the grandfather got better. So throughout the week, everyone was saying, "Wow, Rav Shlomo Kluger, the miracle worker! Wow, he's doing all this." And it's in a day where, let me just point out, Rav Shlomo Kluger was no Baal Meister. He didn't get along with the Hasidim. He didn't go for this miracle stuff. He was a real Litvak. And therefore, he didn't like the fact people were saying he's a miracle worker. So he gets up and he gives his sermon Shabbos morning. He says, "I don't know what this ridiculous talk is. People say I'm doing miracles. What are you talking about? I don't do miracles. I learned Rashi in Chumash." I don't know if it was this week's parasha or not when it happened. But it's right in Rashi. How do I know this? Because we said that this Rashi I just read, that each angel did its own job. And therefore you had 3 different angels. So the question is, and so why then did Lot get his own angel? And then we see that, so obviously Lot didn't deserve his own angel. So however, once he was down to heal Avraham, in other words, he also went to heal Lot. So to here, the angel comes down, the Malach Elyo comes down for every bris milah, and he takes care of the baby. But what's the big deal? Once Elyo was down in this room, we'll skip to the next room and he'll take care of your grandfather. I learned this from Rashi and Chumash. And this to point out that really some want to point out it really was the same shlichus. It wasn't healing Avram and healing Lot, saving Lot with the same job. Why? Because we all know, unfortunately, when a person gets sick, and then, especially if you're older, and then you start to get better, the surgery goes well and everyone thinks you're much better, and then a lot of times, different things happen, and you have to be careful to monitor the situation. So the concern was, we know if someone just recovered from a major surgery, and then all of a sudden they hear bad news, as we know today and then Chazal knew then, it's not just physical, psychological factors play just as much a role as physical. If Avram would have heard that his nephew was in danger, that would have impacted his recovery. So it wasn't a separate shlichus, that was the job. The same angel that went to heal Avram went to heal Lot. It was all part of the same shlichus, and therefore it wasn't a violation of the principle. So either way, that's what Rav Shlomo Kluger says here. That was the pshat over here. We'll have to continue. Why dafka 3 angels, etc. We'll have to tie it into, to the, maybe I'll just say it right now, the mitzvah of Milah. One of the Hasidic Rebbes had a nice pshat that why there's a klal in Kabbalah and Hasidus that for every mitzvah you do, you create a good angel. For every bad thing you do, a bad angel. So every mitzvah you do, so what mitzvah did Avram just do? The mitzvah of Milah. And we all know, if we don't know, there are 3 aspects to the mitzvah of Milah. There's the Milah, literally it's cutting off the foreskin. There's the Priya, revealing the foreskin. And then there's, we'll call it the Mitzitza, the Atafas Dam, according to the Zohar, is getting blood should come out. So they say from these 3 angels, these 3 mitzvahs created these 3 angels. What's the pshat? Because what was the one angel came? One angel came to reveal the good news to Sarah. That was the angel coming from the Priya. You revealed the Or HaMilah. It was revealing. So the angel that you created, an angel of revealing, he revealed the good news to Sarah. The angel that came to destroy Sodom, that's what we're doing. The Arlo represents evil. You cut off the foreskin, that represents bad. You are destroying the bad. And the angel that came to heal Avraham, that's what Mitzitza is supposed to do. Mitzitza, the Gemara says, the sucking out, it's a question, not getting in today's Mitzitza controversy, that's another share, but the Gemara is strictly working with the Gemara. The purpose of Mitzitza is for health reasons. And the Gemara says, it doesn't do Mitzitza, you throw him out of there. You don't throw the person out for any mishap, but since you're putting the child in sakana, that's a serious offense. So therefore, that's the pshat. Dafka, the 3 angels, that with that specific jobs, because the mitzvahs create good things, and therefore the revealing angel was the mepriya, was revealing the membrane. The destroying Sodom, that was the milah, telling that was the cutting off the milah, that was the destroying Sodom, and healing Avram, that was the mitzvah. And that's the pshat. There's 3 specific angels for this specific job. We'll continue. So God came down to visit Avram Avinu to do the mitzvah Bikar Cholim, and then when Avram was speaking to God, he saw 3 people coming, so he ran and took care of them. So at first glance it seems like something irresponsible, chutzpah, but yet the Gemara learns out from that Avram acted appropriately. Not only appropriately, but we should emulate his behavior. The Gemara tells us, Gedola Hachnasus Archim Bikaboas Pnei Hashchina. Greater is the mitzvah of Hachnasus Archim than it is speaking to God. In other words, what they're saying is Gedola, that if you want to get closer to God, because it says Achrei Hashem you have to follow after the path of God. The Gemara says, what do you mean follow after the God? You know, he says, Eish Ocha, you get burnt up. No, so it means follow after his midos. So therefore, by doing Hachnasus Archim, we'll learn more about God than we will just by talking to him. Even though he was talking to the Shechina, the Doa Hachnasus Archim Mikabalas Penei HaShechina. And we learned that out from Avram Avinu. So the Gemara tells us in Sukkah, in 3 ways, Gemilas Chasadim is greater than the mitzvah of Tzedakah. Because Tzedakah can only be given to the living, Chesed can be done to the Chayim and to the Mesim. In fact, the ultimate Chesed Shel Emes is known as the mitzvah of Kvura. And as they write, Eino Mitzapeh Tashlum Gumul, that when we do a favor for someone, so whether we're consciously thinking about it or not, in the back of our minds we say, you owe me one. And that's why there's an expression in Western society, when someone does you a favor, and then the person says thank you, so you say, don't mention it. Don't mention it means don't think we're even now. You still owe me big time. So we know when you do something, and in general, chesed is reciprocal. However, when it comes to kfuras hameis, no one's waiting around to get paid back anytime soon. So therefore, it's a chesed sholemes. So it's ben mechayim, ben b'maves. You can do chesed all the time. Tzedakah only can be done to the poor, but chesed can be done to the rich and the poor. There's many ways of doing chesed. People could be lonely, it could be psychological, they can need help. So tzedakah is limited to the poor. Chesed is whether you're rich or poor. And tzedakah is when you give money, but chesed even involves bodily exertion. So in 3 ways the Gemara says, Gabilas chasadim is greater than tzedakah. So the Maharal says, so besides the quantitative difference between chesed and tzedakah, like the Gemara in Sukkah elaborates on, there's a more fundamental difference between tzedakah and chesed. He said tzedakah, that's an external factor. For example, let's say there's the big hurricane, the storm of Sandy. So obviously a lot of people in need and a lot of good people going around raising money, helping them. But let's say they weren't necessarily thinking of giving charity, but this terrible need happened, so they want to give. Or someone knocks on your door and says, I need something. So tzedakah starts from an external way, and then since you're a good person, okay, yeah, you need something, I'm happy to help you. In contrast to chesed, the chesed is something within. That Avram has to do a good deed, he needs a release. The question is who I do it on. Do I do it on Reuven, Shimon, Levi, etc.? So chesed is something that is within. Tzedakah comes from the external force. That's why we learn. So we learn that. How do we know this is true? That I have a desire, I have to do but there are many people maybe are doing the hurricane relief. That's chesed because they were looking for ways to help people, and this happened to come up. So tzedakah is external, chesed is internal, and then we learned it out from Avram Avinu. By the incident when God is visiting Abraham, and then he sends 3 angels dressed up as people, who's he doing it for? So clearly he's not doing it for the guests, because the guests are angels don't eat. He must be doing it for Abraham. So we see from here, the Maharal points out, the ultimate chesed is for the person doing it. So we see there are 2 aspects. They're different languages, but there's tzedakah and chesed. But I've seen on different Sfarim bring it down different way. There's some say it's following in God's ways. You got to, it's like He's Racham, I'm Racham, or V'yahavta Urecha Kamocha. In other words, different Sfarim bring down 2 different aspects of Chesed or Tzedakah. So we'll just call it Chesed and Tzedakah, but Lav Dafka, we could change the Lashonas on that. They could call it two parts of Chesed. I'm just using the Gemara's language, but it's used in different contexts. So there's a fundamental difference between Chesed and Tzedakah, as we pointed out. And however, there are many nafkaminas between the two. So, for instance, as Chazal tell us, that if one is walking and they have a $50 bill and they drop it, and it's a lucky day, not that they lost $50, but the lucky day is an ani picked it up. So Chazal tell us they fulfill the mitzvah of tzedakah. How could you fulfill a mitzvah of tzedakah? You don't even know you were doing it. But then we see tzedakah is more result oriented. V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, v'nadam chavero is more result oriented. But however, could you say you became a better person by that? I mean, definitely not maybe on some metaphysical level, but certainly how could I become a better person? I didn't even know I was doing it. As opposed to following the midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, imitating God, I'm doing it, I'm becoming a better person. When I'm doing chesed, I am actively becoming a better person. I'm doing it, it's a change in myself. That's why, that's the pshat in the Rambam. The Rambam writes, when it comes to tzedakah, let's say you have a choice. You're going to give $100 to tzedakah. Is it better to give $100 in one shot, or should you give $1 a day for 100 days? So the Rambam writes, it's better to give $1 a day. So the kasha is, why is it any better? It's the same amount of money, and in fact, maybe if you give $1 a day, you're not going to help anybody. What are you going to do with $1 today? You're lucky to get a cup of coffee. But if you give someone $100, that's significant. So the commentators explain, you're right. In Aliba the Ani, he's better getting the $100. Aliba the Ahaftu Arecha Kamocha Tzedakah, he's better off with the $100. But the Rambam is talking about the giver. The Rambam is saying by you doing acts of giving, it has an impact. Every time you do something, it has an impact on you. So the more times you give tzedakah, you become a better person. It transforms you, and that's what the Rambam is focusing on. It's like the Mishnah in the beginning of Shabbos, that the Gemara tells us that more than the poor person gets, the person giving the tzedakah gets, because you give the poor person, okay, so he gets a meal or two, but the impact of chesed on your life, on your neshama, that's eternal. So therefore, you're getting more out of it than you're giving. And that's the two aspects. We find that throughout. We have a concept of mitzvah strichas kavana. We have a concept throughout Shas of mitzvahs requiring kavana. In fact, we have a machlokes throughout Shas whether mitzvah strichas kavana. So they point out that how do we paskin? Do mitzvah strichas kavana or not? So let me just point out. You mean to the one who says mitzvahs ain't strichas kavana? So before you're about to do a mitzvah, you shouldn't have kavana. Is that what it means? Mitzvahs ain't strichas kavana. I'm about to put on my tefillin. I'm about to do matzah. I'm about to do lulav. I shouldn't have kavana. No, of course not. Everyone agrees before you should have kavana. The question is, if you did the mitzvah without the requisite kavanah, do you have to do the mitzvah over again? So that's the shaila. So mitzvahs ain't strichas kavanah means you don't have to repeat the mitzvah. Mitzvah strichas kavanah, if you don't have the requisite kavanah required, you have to repeat it. So how do we paskin? So it's a machlokes in the poskim. So we go with the Magen Avram, the Radvaz, who point out we make a pshara, we make a compromise. When it comes to mitzvahs minat Torah, we pass to mitzvah strichas kavana, and therefore, l'chora, barring any other principles, you'd have to repeat the mitzvah. But a mitzvah midrabana, we say mitzvahs ain't strichas kavana. So that's why the Rambam in Hilchis Kriyas Shema, or I should say the Shulchan Aruch, in Hilchis Kriyas Shema, he brings down the halacha mitzvah strichas kavana. And then yet in Hilchis Sfiras HaOmer, he brings down the question of Sfiras HaOmer. We'll have plenty of classes on that when the time comes. But let's say there's a common conception or misconception, not being able to say the day, like people ask what day is Sfiras, and you say yesterday was. Why don't you just say today was whatever? What's that based on? The concern is that if you, so number one, the concern is only when it's bo bayom. And if it's during the day and they're asking you about last night's day, then obviously you could say it. The whole question is, either it could be ben hashmashas, but there's room to be lenient there. But let's say once it's nighttime, and you say, somebody asks you, I'm counting sphere now, what day? So many have a custom, no, yesterday was 19. Why don't they say today is 20? So the issue is, the concern is because mitzvah strichas, because if mitzvah ain't strichas, it depends on this issue. If mitzvah strichas kavana, so then it's meaningless. I don't have a mind. I could tell you today's 20. But if mitzvah ain't strichas kavana, so then maybe I'm yotze. That's the issue. So the Machaber seems to say not to say the date. Mashma mitzvahs ain't tzrichas kavana. You see the apparent steer in the Machaber? By Hilchas Kriyash Mai seems to say mitzvahs tzrichas kavana. But the Machaber in Tzvias Omer says, be careful not to say the day. If mitzvahs tzrichas kavana, what do you have to worry about? It's only a problem if you think mitzvahs ain't tzrichas kavana. So it seems to be an apparent contradiction in the Machaber. It makes sense since it's an apparent contradiction in the Rambam as well. But the way they interrupt the Machaber is that no, because Kriyash Shema is Daraisa. Svirat Omer Vizmanas is only Drabanan. On a mitzvah Daraisa we pass the mitzvah Srichas Kavana. On a mitzvah Drabanan we say mitzvah ain't Srichas Kavana. Okay. So therefore, let's say someone's on the way, they're going to go to the hospital and do the mitzvah Bikor Cholim or Hachnasas Archim. See, if someone goes and doesn't think about it before, you know what, I'm going to fulfill the mitzvah, you have to Recha Kamocha, whatever the source of the mitzvah is. Could you be Yotze the mitzvah without, if I didn't have Kavanah? Do I say I spent an hour with the Chola? Do you tell me I didn't get the mitzvah because I didn't have kavanah? Does that make sense? I guess it depends what angle you look at it, but I'll say it depends. If it's from the angle of, you becoming a better person from the chesed angle, then we can talk about it. But obviously from the angle of the result is you cheered up this person, you could have saved his life, you made him feel much better. So clearly, the poskim say you fulfill the mitzvah. You can get the mitzvah. Obviously it's better to have kavanah because that's what they point out. When it comes to mitzvahs ben adam chavero, we don't pass the mitzvah srichas kavanah. So from the part that you want to be emulating God, so we can talk about it. But in terms of the aspect of helping someone else, we don't pass the mitzvah strichas kavana, and therefore one could be yotze. Why don't we pass the mitzvahs? Why do the poskim point out of Shlomo Zalman and the Rogachover? We only find in the Gemara mitzvah strichas kavana by mitzvahs be'am l'makom. We don't find it by mitzvah be'am l'chavero. So we explain that because Chazal were concerned if you are koveya bracha on a mitzvah be'am l'chavero, it's going to end up undermining the nature of the mitzvah. The mitzvah isn't supposed to help them. As I gave you the scenario, someone knocks on your door, they're poor, and they need food. You say, great, I go into the kitchen, about to give them the food. I say, wait a second. Baruch atah, and the guy faints. So obviously it doesn't make any sense to make a bracha when I'm helping someone else. As the Gemara says, chatzit shota. That in the middle of davening, well, I can't go in and save the person. So when it comes to mitzvahs b'alam makom, that's when we have kavanah. That's when the Gemara mandates kavanah. But when it comes to mitzvah and chaveru, it's all about the result. So therefore, we say mitzvah and strichas kavanah. It's all about the totzah. We're only concerned, as the Minchas China points out in many places, we only say mitzvah strichas kavanah if we're interested in the ma'isa mitzvah. But if you're interested in the totzah, the result, so that you don't need a kavanah. I'll give one example. He has it all over, but let's start from the beginning. The Minchas Chinuch and Siman Aleph on the mitzvah of Pru Revu. So it's a major discussion on what is the nature of the mitzvah of Pru Ravu. So Tosas and Baba Bas, other places, seems to say it's the Ma'aseh Bia, is the mitzvah of Pru Ravu. Obviously, the Ma'aseh Bia with intent to have kids. Obviously, it's out of your control. And the Minchas Chinuch has a Bechidish that no, it's not the Ma'aseh Bia. It's the result 9 months later. That's why he has the whole famous Minchas Chinuch where he deals with the Yerushalmi rights that someone, let's say you committed adultery. Let's say you have a son from your wife and you committed adultery and she got pregnant and of course she's a very religious woman, no abortion, so you have a girl. So you fulfill your mitzvah Pru Ravu. So the Yerushalmi writes yes. So the Achorim asks, what do you mean? Mitzvah Baba Vayera. What do you mean? You did it b'Yisr. So the Minchas Chinuch has a whole Yisod where he proves that the mitzvah of Pru Ravu is the result. We'll give a share on it in a separate way, but he says, but my nafkamina between the Minchas Chinuch who says it's the result and the Bali Tosas who say it's the Maisa, whether you need kavanah or not. Let's say they talk about having kavanah for the Bia Rishona or in general. So if it's the Maisa Bia, then we could discuss kavanah to fulfill your mitzvah. But if it's a result, so we don't have to, there's no kavanah then because it's only result oriented. That's how they make the distinction. Because as a general rule, it's not always true. But as a general rule, mitzvahs ben amim l'makam are usually involved the Maisa, but mitzvah ben amim chavero involve is usually we're more considered in the result, and that's the pshat that we put on every morning. We put on or not every morning, but most mornings we put on a tefillin shel yad and a tefillin shel rosh. So what's the order? First we put on the yad, then the rosh. So we tie up the fingers and then we take off the rosh and then take off the yad. So if you haven't noticed, we're never left with just the rosh. We're never left just with the tefillin shel rosham. We are all the time left with only the tefillin shel yad. So what's the Musar Haskell here? What's the lesson that we're never left? So that's what Rav Aaron Levine in the Drush Ve'iyun points out, that tefillin shel yad represents hands, doing, action. Tefillin shel rosh represents machshava. So usually, but Adam l'chaveru, we're interested in results and action, and machshava, we're more your kavanah, we're more interested in, since we don't know your kavanah anyway, only God knows it. So in mitzvah ben makom, we have the kavanah. So the pshat is that the tefillin shel yad represents ben adam l'chaveru. Tefillin shel rosh represents ben adam makom. You have to ground yourself on mitzvahs ben adam l'chaveru. So of course, as we say, as we have the two tablets which represent the two sides, the two categories, ben adam makom and ben adam l'chaveru. Of course, to be observant too, you got to keep both sides. However, let's say you want to take on an extra chumrah. So where should you begin? So you have to ground yourself. Begin on not speaking lashon hara. You'll tell me, well, it's not a chumrah not speaking lashon hara, but it's true. But there are heterim for lashon hara. So therefore, for instance, discussion whether there's a general rule, but adam chaveru is only applied to Yisrael and not Goyim. So in theory, there's more. Let's say there'll be some scenario you can make up where you could say a lashon hara and a guy. So in a case where it's mutter, doesn't mean you should say it. You don't become a better person talking about lashon hara about anybody. So if you're going to ground yourself first in taking on chumras ben adam chaveru, and then you can work on the ben adam. Of course, you have to work on both all the time. You need the minimum standard, but all the extra you'll do afterwards. So that's what they represent. So the tefillin shel yad represents the ben adam chaveru, and therefore it's all about result. Basically, you make sure no one cares why you're doing it. Let's say the person's on a palliative or he's terminally ill, and if he doesn't get this medication, he's going to die. So this billionaire donated a machine which saves lives. But on one condition, that you have to have my name all over the machine, and every time someone uses it, you tell them I donated it. Okay, so let me ask you, the guy's dying, and you tell him, look whose name, you think he cares? He couldn't care less what an egomaniac the guy is, or maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a mitzvah l'farsim. Whether it's good or not is, he doesn't care. If this person saving my life, I couldn't care less what his intentions are, as long as he's saving me. So that's what it is. So that's the yisod of Adam Chavero. Obviously it's good you should have kavanah from the chesed angle for you to transform yourself. That's important to have kavanah, to know what you're doing, because how could you change yourself if you don't know what you're doing? But regarding the other aspect, where you have to that it's all about the results, and we just have to make sure that we get to it. And that's why we learn from all these parshas, following the Avos around, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sari, Meinu, and all the Emos, that the Torah is Chayim. We want to learn how to become a mensch. Spend a day with Avraham Avinu. It was all about making sure the guest had the right food at the right time, and that's why, and therefore we're not as worried about kavanah when it comes to Adam Chavero. We're worried about getting the job done, and that's what the different aspects of chesed is. On one hand, either chesed versus tzedakah, or the one aspect of chesed is imitating God. That's how we actually need the kavanah, and we have to transform ourselves. But on the other side is, as long as the goal is the ani or the person who needs help, they receive a help, and that's why we fulfill the mitzvah even without kavanah. If money falls out of a pocket and a poor person gets it, we fulfill our mitzvah of tzedakah.